Fans of Tony Bennett were incredibly excited when the beloved crooner took to the stage recently with Lady Gaga to perform a pair of shows celebrating his 95th birthday. Sadly, these shows will likely be Tony's last, as doctors have advised the singer that traveling to perform is no longer feasible. Join Facts First as we take a look at why Tony Bennett is saying goodbye, doctor's orders. Recently, Tony Bennett took to the stage alongside his longtime friend Lady Gaga to perform 2 shows at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. The 2 sold-out shows marked the event of the singer's 95th birthday, and also came a month ahead of the release of his and Lady Gaga's second album together. The pair of shows was going to be followed by a few performances in casinos along the East Coast. Sadly, it now appears these casino performances have been canceled at the behest of Tony's doctors. For the past 4 decades, Tony has let his son act as his manager, his son Danny Bennett, who's now 66. Danny is largely credited for Tony's career renaissance during the 90s, which helped the singer make a name for himself amongst the new generation of youth. This attention led the singer down the pathway to eventually hooking up with Lady Gaga and recording a pair of albums together. The shows performed at Radio City Music Hall were given the name One Last Time, An Evening with Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga. If the second performance at Radio City had not been Tony's last, the additional performances along the East Coast likely would have been. These additional shows were supposed to have occurred previously, but were rescheduled due to COVID. Fans had been looking forward to these events since the announcement of their temporary cancellation and are likely devastated now that it seems as if the shows will never happen. Danny is also saddened by the fact that his father isn't going to be able to play the shows, but says it's for the best. Those who caught Tony's performances alongside Lady Gaga were likely surprised to learn the singer's health was in such poor shape he was no longer going to be able to perform on stage. But the performance restrictions are said to have more to do with the traveling aspect of performing than the actual act of singing itself. All things considered, Tony seems to be as comfortable on stage as ever. He doesn't miss a single line and doesn't need a teleprompter to deliver them. In the opinion of doctors, though, Tony's miraculous performance on stage is deceptive. One might see Tony not missing a beat on stage and assume he's as healthy as ever, but his ability to perform is no indication of how badly Tony's Alzheimer's disease is affecting him. Since he's spent his whole life on stage, his songs are ingrained in his psyche and will likely stay there until his death, regardless of the effect of Alzheimer's. He can remember all of his songs and perform them just as always, but that doesn't mean he knows what's going on around him. Many believe it's Tony's performances that help to keep him alive. Singing can be incredibly therapeutic, and keeping the old memories alive is arguably what's keeping the singer from death's door. However, Tony will still be able to keep singing, even if it isn't for an audience. Danny had sought to see if there was a way he could create traveling conditions that would allow his father to continue to perform on stage, but Tony's wife put her foot down and said Danny needed to abide by the doctor's orders. Tony's wife is Susan Crowe, and she's open to the idea of her husband continuing to perform in a diminished capacity that doesn't require any travel. Her husband's health is what's most important to her, and Tony is lucky to have her by his side. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like, and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Tony Bennett was born in 1926. When he was growing up, he listened to singers like Bing Crosby and jazz artists like Louis Armstrong. His uncle was a vaudeville performer, and that gave Tony an earlier entryway into show business. Tony was singing and performing by the double digits and worked as a singing waiter in Italian restaurants as a teen. He studied music and painting at the School of Industrial Art in New York before dropping out at age 16 to help support his family. In order to support them, Tony worked several menial jobs. All the while, he was eyeing a career in singing. In the midst of working his several jobs and performing gigs in various nightclubs, Tony was drafted into the U.S. Army during World War II. He made his entrance into the war in 1944 and was discharged in 1946. During his period in the U.S. Army, Tony was involved in active combat and claimed it was like witnessing hell. After returning home, he continued to perform and eventually caught his big break when singer Pearl Bailey invited him to open for her during a performance in Greenwich Village. After this, he released his first big hit, which was a ballad called Because of You. Tony became the famous singer he always wanted, and his career has continued in various forms until today. While there have certainly been many ups and downs for the beloved crooner, he's always managed to pull through and maintain both his audience and ability to perform. After many decades in show business, it was announced in 2016 he was suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Since then, he's done his best to continue to perform and record. But it now appears as if this final period of Tony's career is about to officially come to an end. Tony's recent performances at Radio City will likely go down in history as his last, though it remains to be seen if his upcoming album with Lady Gaga will be his last recorded work. The album is titled Love for Sale, and it's scheduled for release in October of 2021. Tony is currently married to third wife Susan Crowe, who's the one who told Danny there was no way he would continue to tour. The singer had been married twice previously and has had 3 other children besides Danny. His first wife was Patricia Beach. The two met while Tony was performing at a nightclub in Cleveland and married several months later in 1952. The ceremony was in Manhattan and was made notable by the fact that many female Tony fans waited outside the cathedral in all black, mourning the fact that Tony was no longer single. After getting married in '52, Tony and Patricia had 2 children, but their marriage turned sour due to the extreme amount of time Tony spent on the road. He was at his physical peak during this time and was spending as much time as possible performing shows and working on new material. His drive for success eventually proved the marriage's undoing, and they separated in 1965. Several years later, Patricia officially sued Tony for divorce on the grounds he had cheated on her multiple times during the marriage. After separating from Patricia, Tony had become involved with an aspiring actress named Sandra Grant. The two met while filming The Oscar, and their romance evolved over the years until they finally got married after Tony's divorce finalized in 1971. Tony and Sandra were married from '71 until 1983 and had 2 daughters. He met Susan Crowe in the late '80s. She was a school teacher in New York City and is 40 years Tony's junior. Susan's parents were big Tony fans, and Susan was incredibly familiar with the singer's work while she was growing up. Susan was very excited when she first met Tony, and the two eventually struck up a romance. They had been together romantically for nearly 2 decades before finally deciding they should tie the knot in 2007. They're still together today, and their relationship is strong. They formed a charitable organization together known as Exploring the Arts, which helps promote art education in schools. And they're the founders of the Frank Sinatra School of the Arts, a public high school in Queens dedicated to teaching students looking to learn a thing or two about performing. Now it's time to hear from you. Comment down below to share if you're saddened by the announcement that Tony is no longer able to travel to perform. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to FactsVerse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.